Ready for your weekly tech fix? Want to know how technology sets us free? Well, get ready because here it comes. You're listening to Sovryn Tech with your host, entrepreneur and technophile Brian Sovryn. He's got a huge brain. And now, here's Brian.
I am the Rembrandt of the podcast canvas, ready for another great episode of Sovryn Tech. And this week, wow, we've got a lot to go over. One of the things that I want to get out of the way is that once again, of course, I am on location using the Blue Yeti. I am again at a standing desk, so I'm giving myself a standing ovation. But that aside, I will be. This episode is going to be out on the feeds a little bit early, and at SoundCloud.com/SovrynTech a little early, because I am going to be at one of the premier events of 2013. I am very, very excited about this. I will be at TerraCoin Conference 2013. That's right, TerraCoin Conference. Lots of big names going to be there. Google, Facebook's not really a big name anymore, but they're going to be there. All kinds of companies are going to be at TerraCoin Conference 2013, and I couldn't be more excited about it. So I will be there in San Jose for a rendezvous with a whole lot of tech people and financiers, the whole thing. It's going to be a fantastic time in San Jose, California. So if you're there, catch up with me if you happen to see me walking around. I'll also be there, of course, with the producer of Sovryn Tech, the lovely and hyper-intelligent Stephanie Murphy. And I think TerraCoin Conference 2013 is going to be a great time. So moving on, we have other quick news that I want to get out before I break into our main story. And that is that just as of this recording, which would be on May 14th, 2013, Microsoft has announced that they will be releasing for free the Windows 8 Blue update on June 26, 2013, and they're calling it Windows 8.1, and it's totally for free. But in usual Microsoft fashion, they announce that it's coming out, and yet they tell you absolutely nothing of what it actually is and what it's actually going to do. They just give you a bunch of flowery words like somehow we're helping you with your workflow and your personal life, neither of which I think they're really doing. And most people seem to think the same thing, is that, wow, there's a reason that you're making a big deal out of this Windows 8.1. It's because you're actually not achieving those goals, and you need this update to do it. So that is happening, just so you know. Another piece of news is that just starting today, the pre-orders for the NVIDIA Shield, used to be called Project Shield. This is a handheld gaming system, okay, but it's pretty powerful. It's high-end stuff, and it runs on Android, and it can play all these Android games. A lot of games that are only playable on the Tegra chip. It uses the Tegra 4 chip, which is actually more powerful than what's in the Google Nexus 7 tablet, which is a Tegra 3. This is the Tegra 4, so it's got a lot of power. And in beta, apparently, it can also play games off of your PC through Steam. But only certain games, and that's in beta, and it's got a price tag of $350. And I think that's pretty steep for just about anybody to want to go out and get. I think it looks like awesome hardware. I will probably pick one up just because I've been on the mailing list for it. But at the same time, I don't see it getting like mass appeal, not at a $350 price range. I mean, the average person spends less than that on a full home console system. You know what I mean? And especially also when you have the Ouya coming out now for $100 for $99, and you can play all those Android games on that, and I'm sure somehow they'll get in some streaming Steam ability. They already have a couple streaming gaming options, I guess, for the Ouya. Why pay $350? Other than the mobility of it, why pay $350 when you can do all of it for about $100? So that price might change. I got the sense that maybe that's going to come down a little bit. But anyway, let's move right into our main story for the week. And this is something kind of different that I've only talked about ever really briefly on the show before, and I think it was only during like a tech roulette. But it's about cars. And I am somewhat of a automobile aficionado. I don't talk about it that much because I think a lot of people could find it annoying, especially when talking about cars somehow turns into a dick measuring contest, when that's not the word, that's not the point of talking about cars. I can think of some podcasts where that's all they talk about, and they just make fun of everybody for driving something that really is quite a nice vehicle. But anyway, there's this great blogger. His name is Eric Peters. He's a libertarian. I don't know that he's so much of an anarchist, but he's definitely a self-described libertarian. And he talks a lot about, he likes motorcycles, cars. I mean, the whole thing. He reviews all of them. I think he might even work for Motor Trend, if I'm not mistaken. So, but a really great guy. Somebody I hope to have on the show at some point, if I can get that arranged. And this is kind of an older article. It's from January 2013, but it's still very, very relevant. And it's Conspiracy or Merely Convenient is the name of the article. And of course, it's by Eric Peters. You can go to ericpetersautos.com to read his stuff too. It's all great work. In fact, he did this really good article. It was the first time I read him about, if the shit hits the fan, what vehicles do you want? Like say an EMP pulse went off or something, what could you still drive or whatever? And it ended up being the Volkswagen Thing was the ultimate car to have if society collapsed. And you can look into what the Volkswagen Thing was. It was a car from the 70s, and they're still kind of purchasable out there. They're nice, really nice cars. Uniquely, they don't have a radiator, which makes them pretty nice in that regard too. But anyway, so let's see. This article, he's talking about ethanol, and we'll go right into it. Many new cars are optimized for ethanol. Flex fuel compatible is how it's usually described. You'll see it on the back of the cars as flex fuel. The problem, of course, is that a majority of cars in service are not optimized for ethanol. Many are not even compatible with it. Okay, so you go to the gas station, and you'll see like a sticker on the pump at the gas station that says contains 10 or 15% ethanol. So that's what he's talking about, is that they're putting in ethanol to essentially, it's enough to substitute, to kind of it's like watering down milk. You know what I mean? That's the idea, okay? And we'll continue on with the story. One effect, intended or not, of the ever-increasing concentration of ethanol in gas is to accelerate the retirement of older cars. Again, intended or not, that's why it's conspiracy, or is it? This can be considered from a number of points of view. First, there's the economic interests of the car companies. They need to sell new cars at a certain rate in order to remain profitable. The problem for them, that's the companies, is that for more than 20 years now, the useful life of a new car has been increasing to the point that it's common to find cars more than 10 or 12 years old in service as daily drivers. In fact, the average car on the road is now more than 8 years old. Rather than buy a new car every 6 years or so, which was typical in the 70s, people now routinely hang on to their cars for twice as long. That means, if you factor it out over a lifetime, that the average person buys just 2 or 3 new cars versus 4 or 5. Even worse, from the standpoint of the car companies, is that a large and growing number of people aren't buying new cars at all. Because lightly used late model cars with 3 or 4 years and 30,000 or 40,000 miles on them still typically have more useful life left in them than a brand new car had back in the 1970s. By purchasing a used car, one saves a tremendous amount in upfront costs and suffers very little in the ways of down-the-road costs, or down the road meaning like warranties going out, things like that, and obviously frequent trips to the garage. As a result, new car buying has become less common and less frequent. From a purely business point of view, this is not good news for the car industry, especially in a saturated, mature market without the potential for exponential growth that existed 40 or 50 years ago. So call it conspiracy theorizing if you like. The fact remains that ethanol is helpful to the car industry because it gets rid of older cars, thereby creating demand for new ones. This may be a merely coincidental confluence of economic interests and political interference in the economy. The government's pushing of ethanol. Also, for a while there, the government owned a couple of car companies, if you remember, a few years ago, Chrysler and pretty much GM. But the fact remains that the dosing of gas with ethanol in ever-increasing amounts, it keeps going up, does serve the economic interests of the automakers. That sort of thing, what was called derisively planned obsolescence back in the 60s. Ooh, planned obsolescence. See, now a lot of people treat that as a modern term with computers and other electronic devices. That's a phrase from back in the 60s, according to the article. Has probably always been at least a background consideration for large-scale consumer good producers such as car companies. There is no question, for example, that the automakers perform durability studies to determine exactly how long a given component can be expected to work before it fails or requires repair, if only purposes of warranty coverage. But there may also be a more sinister motive in operation with regard to the ethanol slow drip. The government may simply wish to accelerate the extinction of vehicles not equipped with the actually, big brotherish electronics such as in-car black boxes and computers that are the technological prerequisites for external monitoring of, even external control of, our vehicles. Now, this is very accurate. I mean, now that's the part where people should be going, oh, conspiracy, conspiracy. Actually, vehicles that have OnStar in them, which are pretty much GM vehicles, can be turned off by the police. Now, the selling point on that is that if your car gets stolen, you can just turn your car off. But, of course, Eric Peters is kind of leading in that, hey, guess what? They can control your car now. In fact, who knows? If they can turn it off, can they affect the accelerator? Of course, because there isn't an actual... There used to be, when you would push down the pedal on your car, this would be back in like the early 80s, before the computers. Really, computers in cars and these black boxes and everything didn't become a big deal until 1996. That's why if you have a car older than 1996, and kudos to you if you do, if you have a car older than 1996, if you go to get it inspected, if you have state inspection where you are, or nation inspection, and like if you're in Europe, if you go there, you'll notice that if your car is 95 and below, 1995 and below, it doesn't have to go through the rigorous testing and inspection process that any car over 1996 does. Why is that? Because since 1996, the computer has pretty much controlled everything that happens in the car. If you had a car from there in the early 80s and you press down the accelerator, you would literally be moving. There would be pure physics in motion here. Your foot pushing down would pull on a really tense wire that would accelerate by the carburetor and make your car go faster. Okay? So there was a direct connection. In fact, you could even cheat. You could throttle your car. You know what I mean? Like, how you rev your engine? You used to be able to do that under the hood of the car. You could lift off the air filter on the engine, and there was a little lever that you could just, go, and you could do it under the hood just to see how your car sounded. Okay, it used to be very, very popular with guys with gear, like what they call gearheads. Guys that love their cars, and they used to do a lot of mechanic work and engine tuning and everything, because you could do it right there. You didn't have to actually go back into your car, then hop back out and go around. It was all very convenient and all very real. There wasn't a control. It's where now that whole action of process is completely computer controlled. So what Eric Peters is kind of hinting at is that could somebody like slow your car down or accelerate it remotely? Yes, absolutely. Of course they could. Is that something for you to be concerned about? That's up to you. I don't worry about it, but maybe that's something that's in the back of your mind. You know that you want more control with your car. And we'll keep going with the article. There's just a little bit left. It might be argued, not unreasonably, but the government knows it cannot impose, for example, automated enforcement of speed limits or electronically enforced restrictions on driving until everyone, or at least almost everyone, is driving a car with the technology necessary to make such things practical. And also that the government knows it cannot call for an outright ban on older cars lacking such technology. There would be too much pushback. However, if older cars simply wear out more rapidly as a result of being fed fuel that weren't made to burn, then the problem solves itself quietly and fairly quickly. Most people will not hang on to a 10 or 12-year-old car that's gotten to the point of needing expensive or frequent repairs, or which just isn't reliable any longer, and when they realize that a later model but non-ethanol friendly used car will likely give them the same trouble, they'll queue up at the new car dealers. If E15, that's gas with 15% ethanol, is mandated, as appears very likely, the timetable will speed up. Most new cars built before 2008, that's barely 5 years old, cannot safely use E15. It's quite possible that via the fuel they're fed, within 10 years there will be very few cars in regular use that were not made before the year 2010. Deliberate or not, that's where things appear to be headed. So, again, he's raising the open question. Eric Peters is leaving it open. Look, I'm not saying it's a conspiracy. I'm just saying that all these things are in place for it to look like one. Or all these things are in place to where maybe, hey, what are these guys doing? You know, and every industry does this. It's not just the automotive industry. Why did 3D come back? You know, why did 3D movies, right? 3D movies were done at their best. You know, I mean, yeah, Avatar, the movie Avatar had some really nice new 3D technology, and IMAX is kind of a nice improvement too, but IMAX has been around since the 90s. Okay, so why is that suddenly a big deal now? But 3D movies, you know, they were at their pinnacle in the 1950s in black and white. Why did that come back? You would have thought, hey, everybody just realized. In fact, if you asked moviegoers in the 90s, they would have told you 3D's a gimmick. You know, that's why we don't go to see 3D movies anymore. It was stuff meant for carnivals and meant for, like, going to, you know, when you go to Six Flags or something, maybe you'd catch a 3D movie. But it wasn't taken seriously. Now it's taken seriously again. Why is that? Now I'll tell you straight up. This is a conspiracy, okay, if there is one. In that TV companies, Samsung, Sony, Sharp, go down the list, they need to sell more TVs. They had their huge boon when they forced everybody to get HD TVs. They had this massive boon in sales that they hadn't seen. You know, interesting thing, I had, growing up, we had a Zenith that's a company that used to be like a monster in the electronics world from like the World War II up. And we had a Zenith television that was 27 inches. Okay, color television from, I want to say it was from like the 70s. We had that TV until 1999, and it still worked until finally the red just went out of the color tube. Everything still worked on it. Amazing. Okay, if your stuff lasts that long, like Eric Peters is saying about these cars, you're not going to be able to, you know, why make a new car every year? Why make new models every year? Why hire people? Because you don't have to make more cars. These cars just last 10, 12 years, like Eric Peters was saying. Okay, same thing with TVs. They had to come out. They had to, okay, what new technology can we schlep onto humanity to make them think that this is the new hotness that they need? You know, so they came up with 3D. What did they do this year at the Consumer Electronics Show 2013? At CES 2013, they came up with 4K TVs, which we've talked about on this show before. And it's a marketing scheme. That's all it is. The whole thing's a scam. Okay, and you don't. I mean, first off, you don't need TV at all. But second off, you know, I mean, they're just coming up. You know what I mean? It's like they're putting on a new coat of paint and saying, "Here, no, this is a new TV." You know, like somehow you can tell the difference. Come on. Anyway, so the same thing. So what Eric Peters is saying is the same thing as it may be happening with cars, is that they want, you know, these cars are lasting. They built them so well that they're lasting forever. And at the increased cost, because of a failing economy around the world, at the increased cost, you know, of new vehicles, people are just like, oh, just get a used one, and it has all the tech I need. And it's so funny because these car makers, they're trying all these tricks. Like, yeah, we're putting in technology, you know, we're putting in-dash GPSs, and we're putting in like Bluetooth stereos and all this stuff. Finally, 40 years after the first car radio, 50 years after the first car radios get slapped in, they start, or the first stereo systems, I should say, get slapped in. They start coming with like subwoofers finally put in them, even though people for 30 years have been putting their own aftermarket subwoofers into cars. Finally, they're putting in all these technologies, but you know, all this in-dash technology stuff, it's on your phone, and you can just mount your phone in there. You don't have to do that. You don't need a car that has all that stuff. Again, they're doing the same thing the electronics companies are doing. They're just like, they're BSing you with this technology that has nothing to do. In fact, you know what? And Eric Peters, actually, if I ever get him on the show, I'm sure he can reiterate the point I'm about to make to you. There hasn't been any really significant technology changes in cars since the 1960s. with the dream cars of the 1950s, you can find all the tech that exists now inside of cars, pretty much, from automatic closing, closing back doors, trailer. Sorry, I can't think of the word. Anyway, the back door of the car, all this stuff, auto closing, airbag suspension, all this advanced stuff, all-wheel drive, all these things was all invented forever ago. And they eventually got to the point where they were building cars just so darn well that now they're kind of lasting. And that because of the internet and because of, some degree of like legitimate journalism, people have learned how to maintain their cars so that they don't fail. And perhaps if these companies did have planned obsolescence in them, put planned obsolescence in their vehicles, that they could get around it. They could make it last longer. And it's like, well, just treat it a little bit better like this, And the ethanol thing, I mean, that's a real problem, because in fact, the really scary part isn't even with your average consumer car. The real problem is with trucks. Because those tractor trailers going by that make this country, the United States, go round and round, that are delivering all the goods to the grocery store so that you can go there and grab some delicious food, or go to Walmart and get some clothes or something. Those trucks are failing because hosing is loosening up because it can't handle burning the ethanol. There's all these mechanical problems that are occurring, and this is what Eric Peters is referencing, is that it's causing all these mechanical failures in these vehicles. And again, also, not just in consumer vehicles, but in tractor trailers, which, let me tell you, if tractor trailers crash, that's it. We're going to have to go back to trains, which, I mean, Dagny Taggart may love that, but, otherwise, what do you do? So it's a genuine concern. Is it intentional? What's my opinion on it? I don't know that it's intentional. I could believe it. I've worked for a company an electronics company, not a car company, but I worked for an electronics company that actually made sure that there was planned obsolescence in their products. So do companies do that? Oh, certainly they do. Is this a government and car company, co-op job? Maybe. I mean, like I said, really, they owned two car companies for a while and they needed to make bank on it. So how could they do that? Well, just ruin everybody's car, so they had to buy a new one. Even the government did that cash for clunkers stuff. I mean, remember that? Maybe there's a conspiracy. I'll leave it up to you, but those are the facts, and I appreciate Eric Peters' write-up. This is Brian Sovryn. I'll be right back with more Sovryn Tech.
Are you tired of people wasting away all their precious time? Then stop using the same social media as them. Google Plus is a centralized hub for all of your Google services, your ideas, and your passions. Google Plus has a much more international user base, as to where other forms of social media center around so-called developed nations that really don't do anything exciting in the first place. Google Plus has almost no spam and has very few cat pictures of police, or anything else government-related. Stop using Facebook. You have an alternative. Start using Google Plus today.
Tech Roulette. You want to play?
It is time for Tech Roulette, where I cover the stories that get sent to me through various channels, be it through sovryntech@hush.ai, which is the email address, sovryntech.com, which has to the right side of the page. You can, submit posts. You can even ask me questions there for like listener email, or that gets sent to me through Google Plus, which if you go to gplus.to/Brian Sovryn, you can connect directly with me. I post pretty much everything on Google Plus. I mean, even some of my most personal thoughts. So here's your shot. If you want to connect, with as a listener, if you want to connect with the host of the show, I'm giving you free reign to do so. And I've gotten some heat, gotten some flack, that people post on my Google Plus profile, and that's fine. And because I want to talk about it, especially if I'm wrong. When you're doing a tech show, a science and tech show, technology moves so fast. Like inside of the 5 minutes of a break, literally everything the whole world could suddenly change. Like someone could just come out with a quantum computer, and then everything I would talk about the new, Intel Ivy Bridge 4 or whatever, that comes out, would be absolutely meaningless. So it's very, very easy for me to be wrong or dated, and I don't mind being corrected on either of those. And also, I mean, equally, and most people really, I keep saying this because I get asked this a lot. It's like, all right, how do you go about, and I will do a special about how I produce Sovryn Tech, how I make Sovryn Tech what it is. But most people don't realize I barely look at my computer screen other than to read the story. In fact, that's the only time I look at my computer screen on the laptop that's in front of me. And I do this all from memory. Everything I'm talking about is pretty much all from memory, unless, again, if it's a Sovryn Tech special, then I do have notes. But otherwise, I'm just, running with my, biological Wikipedia. So anyway, this story comes from a listener, and it's from stuff.co.nz, which I'm guessing is in New Zealand. And it's about a site that I kind of teased talking about here and there. But I've yet to do so, and I'm kind of glad that I did. I didn't like jump on the news about it, because it seems to me to be falling apart very fast from what it claimed to be. And this is about Mega, okay, which used to be Mega Uploads. Mega is a cloud file sharing service, okay, kind of similar to Google Drive. And it's meant to be really private and really cheap, really inexpensive to use. In fact, I think for free you get like 50 gig. As to where to get 50 gig on, say, Dropbox or Google Drive, you're hashing out at least $2.50 to $5 a month. So, yeah, so as far as like, is it available for everybody, and can you get quite a bit of value out of it for paying nothing? Yeah, I suppose that's true. So, but let's go into the story. And the story, it's titled "Dotcom Site Takes Down Blueprints for 3D Gun." And we'll just read the story. Kim.com's Mega website could help track down people who downloaded blueprints for a printable plastic gun that has put law enforcement agencies around the world on edge. More than 100,000 copies of the blueprint for the Liberator gun, designed by the United States firm Defense Distributed, have been downloaded since they were put online last week. Okay, so, I'll keep going a little bit more. The gun can be manufactured using a 3D printer, which can be legally bought for upwards of $10,000. Britain's Mail on Sunday said 2 undercover reporters smuggled a Liberator through airport-style security onto a Eurostar train service between London and Paris at the weekend, though without the gun's required metal firing pin or .38 caliber metal ammunition. So there's this gun that this guy Corey Wilson, who I believe he's in Texas, Cody Wilson, thank you. See what I mean about going on memory? Anyway, Cody Wilson, he invented this 3D gun called the Liberator gun, and it's not a very practical gun. I mean, I don't know if it's like a single shot. I'm not sure. I'm not a big person on guns, so I haven't paid a whole lot of attention to this, other than I am intrigued by the fact that it's proving that 3D printers are going to eliminate the need for government regulations, or it's going to prove that we don't need government regulations and things of that nature, and it's going to show just how much all that kind of stuff holds back. But anyway, so I was intrigued by that aspect of it. I really could care less about it as being a gun, because that just doesn't mean anything to me. It's fine if you like guns, you like guns. That's all right. And let's see. Most Liberator blueprints have reportedly been downloaded via Dotcom's Mega online storage service, which Defense Distributed used because it was fast and free. Dotcom did not approve, and Auckland-based Mega has removed the blueprints from its servers. Mega Chief Executive Vikram Kumar said Mega would be able to determine the Internet Protocol addresses and, in some cases, the email addresses of people who had downloaded Liberator blueprints from its servers, but it would first need to be presented with a court order requiring it to hand over the information. One more line. Whether such a court order was possible would depend on how courts interpreted the provisions of the Arms Act, he believed. The United States Embassy was yesterday unable to comment on whether U.S. authorities might seek such an order or whether they might encourage authorities in New Zealand to obtain one. Mr. Kumar gave the assurance while questioning the worth of the telecommunications interception capability and security bill, which had its first reading in Parliament on Thursday. As well as imposing new obligations on traditional telecommunications firms to assist the GCSB spy agency. The bill contains, that's all stuff in New Zealand, the bill contains unactivated discretionary powers relating to over-the-top communications services such as Mega, Google, and Skype. Business, Innovation, and Employment Ministry advisor Brad Ward said the powers could be used to make such companies invest in equipment and expertise required by law enforcement agencies to intercept and decrypt their customers' communications. Mr. Kumar said that those powers were intrusive and questioned whether the government intended to target select New Zealand-based service providers, some of which decide the costs and technical complexities were simply not worth it and might shut up shop here. He said that they did not mean he felt Mega was being targeted by the legislation or that it was threatening to pull out of the country. Okay. So Mega is this site that makes all these claims. Yeah, we're taking on the government. We're going to have privacy. Nothing can stop us now because Mega uploaded a year before to the day that Mega actually opened back up earlier this year. Or in late 2012, I believe it was. They're making all these big, the guy who's the head of Mega, his name is Kim.com. That's his name. Okay. And he's a bit of a, character, and he made all these boasts. We will not, we're not going to deal with this. You're going to have, piracy forever, blah, blah, blah. The internet is free, etc. All the good stuff, all the nice things that people want to hear. And then it's like, oh, well, you guys are uploading plans for guns. We're going to take those down. Wait a minute. What are you talking about? I thought that this was supposed to be, where information is free and no one's going to touch it and we have total privacy, blah, blah, blah. No, I guess not. Also, to further really knock, unfortunately, what I thought had tremendous potential, even I thought that at first. I was like, well, yeah, maybe this guy's got enough, he's doing it in New Zealand to where the governments are, the economics are a little more lax. And I thought, I was really hopeful, hey, maybe this will change everything. Maybe this will be it, where they say, no, you can't shut us down now, and we'll let we'll let everybody upload whatever they want. And, I had hopes, and this isn't the first thing to happen. At one point, Mega was accepting Bitcoins, apparently, to pay for the service. If you wanted like more than 50 gigs, if you want 100 gig or a terabyte or whatever. That has stopped as well. And of course, they're not the only company to get hard on Bitcoin. Apple's doing that too, which is something we may get into later. But do you see the problem here? That how exactly do you come off with all this bravado saying, no, the information is free. The internet is meant to be free. No censorship. Let's do this. And then somebody happens to upload a gun that, as far as I can tell, barely works. Okay. Now they talked about in the article about how on that train ride, on that Eurostar train, that they were able to smuggle the gun, even though they couldn't bring the metal firing pin. So there's still this isn't a gun that, again, the Liberator, which is named after an equally kind of crappy World War II. Well, again, I don't know that this new Liberator is that crappy, but what was a crappy gun in World War II that got dropped off to, dissidents in Nazi Germany. This thing, it's you can't just print the whole gun. You still need some like little parts here and there. So it's not exactly perfect, but it doesn't take much, and it can be printed and it can be made anywhere, and the supplies can be had in just about anywhere on the planet, from what I understand. Okay. So, but again, here's this company who just keeps saying, oh yeah, we're internet baby, we're free, we do whatever you want, let's make this happen, we're rebels. And then once somebody puts up a gun, no, take that down. And in fact, you know what, United States or New Zealand, if you're going to have to come to us with a warrant, that way we don't look too bad, but we'll gladly tell you just who downloaded all these things. So they they have a list. So much for that privacy that Mega was talking about. We're not going to give away any information. Your stuff is private. We're going to make sure it's private. We're going to go through double door firewalls and all this crap. And no, I guess not. I guess your information, you as a person, are just as liable as if you were using, you may as well have been using the government's, personal internet and have gotten tracked, because that's how much Mega seems to care. Again, in saying this, I'm not supporting guns. Okay, I've said it many times on my appearances on Free Talk Live, on Pork Therapy, and on this show. I could care less about guns. Guns are not going to give me the liberty that I want. Guns are not going to give me the world that I want. They have practically nothing to do with it, other than that the people that I want, or the institutions that I want to go away, use them. That's the only part they have in my world. And so I'm not being like, yeah, rah rah liberator, okay. And I don't know if the people at Mega have this principled stance of that, yeah, no, if people are going to start using weapons, I mean, that's okay for information to be free, but again, this is still just information. It's still ones and zeros. But if it's weapons, I have a problem with that. Maybe they should have said that long before. It's not like 3D printers are a new technology. There were 3D printers long before there was a Mega. And, that they didn't foresee this, or that, it just goes to show that I think Mega was Kim.com was pulling a marketing scheme. I think that's all he was doing. I wanted him to have a principled stance, but after about a month or two of it, I had the feeling that no, this guy doesn't have any kind of like really principled stance. He's just and maybe he already made, and this is, if you make something and you make big money out of it out of the gate, that's great. Maybe he's already made what he wanted out of it, and now it's out of his hands and he doesn't care, and he's leaving it to other people like Coomer that was talking through most of this article. Kim.com didn't really have anything to say. But again, and in fact, more troubling, I even saw pictures this story is pretty fresh. This is only a couple days old as of May 14th, 2013. Or actually, it's not even a couple days old. I think I got this morning. And I remember just last week seeing pictures where people were putting up Kim.com, hanging out with the Anonymous and all this stuff, like they were all good guys. And, that's just not the truth. Maybe he'll come out, maybe there'll be a statement, and he'll come out and say, no, look, I'm taking charge of my company. The Liberator plans can stay up there and come and get me. Because that's the attitude that he came at with this. And again, I don't know. I haven't researched yet. Only when I was looking into Mega now did I realize that they had removed their Bitcoin. But then again, at the same time, they may never have actually accepted Bitcoin. That's something I'll have to look into a little bit more, and I'll get back to you on that. Because, again, there are quite a few companies that seem to be kind of backing away from Bitcoin. Including Apple. A few months ago, they started removing Bitcoin apps from the iOS store. And why do that? I mean, well, of course, for Apple, that's not that crazy, is it? Because they don't allow for farting apps on iOS. If you made an app that makes, if you made an app that sounded like that, it gets taken off the store. No, we will not have these farting apps. Farting is indecent, even though every human being does it. So I expect nothing less from a company as closed source and as I don't even know how to describe. They're not behind the times, but at least socially, I think they're behind the times. They're not getting it. But anyways, back with Mega. If you have thoughts on this, if you have a better grasp, a better understanding of what's going on at Mega, maybe you have some inside information. I know a couple of listeners to the show who actually are kind of in tight with some of the guys over at Mega. Please, email me and let me know. Tell me this is all wrong. Tell me this isn't the truth, and that Mr. Kumar was, just talking out of his ass, and he wasn't being serious, and he was just maybe trying to talk nice to the government, but in reality, they're going to keep everything nice and hidden. And that actually, if you go to this link, the Liberator gun, the data, again, this is all it is data. The data is still up there, at this hidden link. So don't worry. I mean, not that it matters, because a website that actually does care about the internet, and in fact treats the internet as a sacred object, the Pirate Bay, they're personally hosting the Liberator blueprints, as well as, once it gets into torrents, which the Pirate Bay is a torrent site if you're not aware. Once it gets into torrents, the animal's free. There's just, you can't stop it then. You can't. Google can block searches and all this stuff, but once something's gone peer-to-peer, this is why Bitcoin is having a hard time being stopped by anybody that tries. Because once things go peer-to-peer, it's over. You'd have to arrest everybody in the world. Because who knows who actually has it, and people are bouncing everything around on VPNs. So credit to the Pirate Bay for sticking to their guns, in that, yeah, we'll make sure this goes out there. In fact, we'll host it ourselves. And we'll even front page it for you, to make sure that this can get out there. And that's an interesting thing. Actually, the Pirate Bay has they have kind of a religion. And in fact, I kind of consider myself, in the game of it. It's called Copy Me. It's KOPIMII. It, as in copy me, get it? Copy data, copy me. Okay. And it's pretty cool. And the whole idea behind it is just that information is meant to be free. Open source is the way. The internet is sacred, all this stuff. There's nothing in there about a god. In fact, there's a book called, I think, Power, Broccoli, and Copy Me. And that's the Bible for Copy Me. And there's nothing religious really about it. It's just a statement that, we have to, again, that torrents are good. We have to let information out, all of which are great things. And that oftentimes when people have done this have led to their death, like Aaron Schwartz. But I guess Kim.com's not willing to put his money where his mouth is. This is Brian Sovryn, and I'll be back with more Sovryn Tech.
Are you ready?
I've never seen anyone so treated like a god in my life.
Brian Sovryn as guest co-host tomorrow night, and so that should be a good show.
On that note,
we just added Brian Sovryn.
Okay, we haven't.
Oh, is he good?
He's been in the audience.
He's certainly got opinions on things. Yes.
I'm so close to being like God, no one is above me. Okay? Absolutely no one. I don't take orders from anybody. And, that's how much closer to God can you get?
Is there anything he doesn't do better than everyone else? Oh, that's just his way of talking. He's one of the best.
Break it down!
Catch Sovryn Tech, the show about technology and how it can set you free with me, Brian Sovryn. That's Sovryn at soundcloud.com/SovrynTech.
Think you can tell me what to do?
Wow! Oh. It's a website of the week.
It is Website of the Week, where I cover websites that I find either fun or funny or useful or informative, anything that I think my listeners might be interested in, or something that just kind of tickled my own fancy. And this week, this is something that is an absolute complete waste of time. If you have time to waste, it's really not a waste of time, because you can actually really create some beautiful things with it. But the website is weavesilk.com, as in WEAVE silk, SILK.com. And what it's pretty much drawing. And it's all these silk lines, so they're very rippled. Just picture what silk sheets look like when, you're laying in them and moving around, and they just kind of flow and crinkle nicely, even if you're moving at a somewhat rapid pace in them or something. And equally, you can move your mouse at speeds. This all gets done with your mouse, and you just kind of move it around. There's a bunch of little settings like what colors you want, and it's just these like kind of 3D looking silk lines, drawings. It's really beautiful. You have to go there to see it. They do have an app. It's mostly done online, and you can save it and use it as like a desktop. But there is an app for iOS if you want that. And I imagine actually if it's for iOS where you could use it on an iPad or an iPhone, that's got to be beautiful to do with your fingers, because you normally wouldn't be using a mouse for that. Not to say that you can't. But you can just make these really, really wild designs. And it's very pretty art, and you can just keep adding stuff over it, and there's a whole lot of settings that you can mess with. It looks really simple, but if you start clicking on a few of the buttons that exist on the webpage, you can really make some fun, gorgeous art. And it's almost kind of hypnotic, when you look at it, because the lines are just so beautiful. And depending on which way you're doing it, you can make it where like every movement you make doubles, mirrors, the left and the right are mirrored. And so there's this nice symmetry that looks really pretty. It's quite it's almost a game. I don't know if I'd call it a game, but it's just, you can make some stunning artwork, some designs that are just, again, stunning, like I said. So I just thought, I saw it a while back and I thought it was so cool. And while granted, again, what are you going to do with this other than like maybe use it for wallpapers or something? Well, you could draw, like you can make some really fancy, I don't know that Photoshop even has the abilities that this allows for, these kind of ribbon lines that let you draw. You have to see it to really grasp what it does. But you can make some gorgeous, maybe like artwork that you could send as kind of an e-card or something. Or that you could print out, and I love that. This is one of the things where computers are really, really amazing. Is I love the idea of getting like prints done, of whatever you want that you find on the internet or that you make with a computer, and then getting it nicely, professionally printed out and framed. And I'm telling you, the artwork with this that you can do with these like silk lines is definitely, in my opinion, worthy of framing. And if I walked into a place with it, I would definitely say it was high class. And again, weavesilk.com, WEAVE, silk, SILK.com. And you'll go there, just because now you have to see it now that I've talked about it, and I can't show it to you over a podcast. But you'll probably go there. I guarantee you'll sit there for like an hour and just woo. Yeah, your mind will just wander, like making all these wavy lines. Pretty awesome. Anyway, check it out. Weavesilk.com. Silk the game, essentially they call it. And I'll be back with more Sovereign Tech.
Time now for 90 Seconds on Sex with Dr. Paul.
Researchers have looked into the different kinds of conversations that college-age guys have with their male friends regarding relationship issues, and the kinds of conversations that college-age women have with their women friends regarding relationship issues. Typical examples of the things that women talk to each other about include getting into bad relationships because they're afraid of being lonely, or staying in bad relationships, feeling guilty or confused after having casual sex, how to handle breakups, and juggling their boyfriends with their families. The typical things that guys talked about to each other regarding relationships were different. They included frustration around finding a date or finding a girlfriend, feeling insecure at the start of a relationship, having unequal feelings in a relationship, handling upset girlfriends, and handling girlfriends who are alcoholic or drinking way too much. While I think it's great for guys to get male support and for women to get female support, when it comes to questions about relationships, the two groups clearly talk about different things. So it's never a bad idea for men to get feedback from both women and men, and for women to get feedback from both women and men as well. That way, you've got your bases fully covered.
For more, visit 90secondsonsex.com.
It is time for listener emails, where one day I'm going to do a liner for that music, but I love the music from Jake Kaufman, great guy. But anyway, it is time for listener emails. Before I do get into the listener email, though, just a reminder that yes, I will be at TerraCoin Conference 2013 in San Jose, California. They've rented out, they've got 4 hotels to hold this in this huge convention center that's attached to 2 hotels, one of them being the Marriott. I always recommend the Marriott. And that's how big TerraCoin is that it's already having a conference with all these big tech giants there. And Free Talk Live is actually going to be airing from there. I'll be there from Thursday to Sunday, and Sunday night I will be with Stephanie Murphy and of course the beautiful Mark Edge to do Free Talk Live from the convention center, we think. And yeah, so TerraCoin Conference 2013. Actually, it's obviously, I'm sure everybody that's listening to this gets the joke. It's actually Bitcoin Conference 2013, but I am thinking about that while I'm there. I have a press badge for while I'm there for Sovryn Tech, and I am thinking about introducing it as TerraCoin Conference 2013 to everybody I interview. And I'm wondering if they're going to just maybe be nice, just think that I got the wrong cryptocurrency. But anyway, I do like TerraCoin. And, I think if there's a copper in the gold and silver world of Bitcoin and Litecoin, if there is to be a copper in the cryptocurrency world at present, I'm betting on that being TerraCoin. So if you want to jump in on that, they're at a really low price right now. Anyway, but, what do I know? I'm just a guy that does a podcast. What I got this week was a listener email. It wasn't an email so much. It was a question. It was more of a listener question from my Google Plus page. My personal, Brian Sovryn, the Google Plus page, gplus.to/Brian Sovryn. If you want to connect with me, put me in your circles, whatever you want to do, okay? And what the question was essentially about, well, first off, I actually, believe it or not, I got more emails. Last episode, I talked about the Book of Enoch from some Bibles and not in the Bible. And I got emails of people wanting me to talk more about it because, with listener email section, we only have so long, to talk about these things. And, so maybe I'll end up doing a special about the Book of Enoch just to be able to address all that instead of getting to it in another listener email section because I may not have the time. Unless, of course, if my listeners want to email me and say, hey, make the show longer, I'll make the show longer. I can pretty much make it as long as you want. I just don't want to take up too much of your time. How about that? And the question that I actually got from the Google Plus page was, the gist was, if the government can turn off the internet, because I talked about that in the last episode as well, how they're creating their own kind of quantum internet, their own quantum messaging service, which means that they can send a message from computer A to computer B, and there's no way you can tell what was sent. That you can't snoop it, you can't, and nothing can take it down. That's the deal. That's what they meant by quantum internet. And so the question was, if the government, and I had mentioned that the government can turn off the internet, and that's probably why they're interested in having this kind of technology beyond the, cryptographic nature of it. And so if they can turn off the internet, is the question, why don't people make their own? And also, could I talk more about, what are the details on how they can turn off the internet? Some of those details, no, I can't talk about. Not because I'm afraid to talk about it, but because there's people I know who I trust who say that the technology exists, and I am slightly running off of their information and trusting them in so doing. Okay, so what it takes to actually do that, now I can theorize as to how they would do it, just because the United States actually controls most of the domain names around the world, and I suppose to some degree they could just suddenly block all the IPs and maybe even just, kill all the domain names, and then there's no more internet. The infrastructure's still there, but there's just no more data. So that's a possibility. I'm not saying that that's how it's going to go down. Okay, that's something that I can't really talk about. But anyway, so if they can, which yes, they can, why aren't we making our own secure internet? Now, the government, not just with quantum messaging, okay, or quantum, the quantum internet that they're developing. That's not the only thing that the government already has as far as, their own internet. They've had their own internet for a while. The NSA developed it. It's called SIPRNet. And SIPRNet, it's designed, that's kind of the broad base. It's a bit of a pyramid as far as how much, as far as like all these different levels of internet that are available through government services and mainly through the Department of Defense. You have SIPRNet, which is kind of the lowest. It's just above the internet, we'll say. And then, there's even below that. There's NIPRNet. And then like the big one is what they call JWICs, which is what Bradley Manning is kind of in trouble for getting into. He's not kind of in trouble. He's really in trouble for accessing, supposedly. He got into JWICs. And that's the Joint Worldwide Intelligence Communication System. So the whole world pretty much has this secret internet, okay? And it's as simple as other cables. There are, I think I can safely say that there are certain, buildings that you can go to, government installations, where there's routers, and there's a blue wire and there's a gray wire. The gray wire is regular internet. The blue wire is SIPRNet or JWICs. You choose which one goes into which router, and that, and a lot of times these government guys can mess up which one goes in where, okay? Because, I imagine it's got to look pretty confusing because, again, what made the internet what it was? It was the private sector. It was everyday people figuring out, what can we do with this? The government invented the internet. They invented ARPANET. There's no question about that. That's how it is. But they didn't know what to do with it, so they kind of just let it free, But then the private sector is like, we can figure out what to do with this, and they did. So when you take that same group of, when you take that same organization, that being the United States government, and you expect them to make their own secret internet, they're going to. It's just they're guaranteed to mess it up because they didn't know what to do with it in the first place. And really, it's not just them. I think it's fair to say that. Nobody knows really. The internet now is still, I know we're Web 2.0, but I think we're actually like an internet 0.1. I don't think anybody really knows what the internet's going to finally fruition into if it continues on. If it does not continue on, though, let's talk about that. What are these alternatives? Why aren't we, if the government's making their own internet, why aren't we? We are. The hackers are working on it. In fact, it's half done. Okay. So what are the ways that they're doing this? One of the ways they're doing it isn't necessarily an internet, but it's definitely very secure. It definitely blows away, quantum internet that the government's working on. One of them is called USB dead drops. And what these are, they're actually flash drives that are often password protected or something like that. They're using some kind of like TrueCrypt encryption. And they'll drill these USB flash drives into cement walls in various areas, and you can walk up to the cement wall, plug in your laptop quick, jam it into the side of the wall essentially, and you can access the data on it, and you could transfer stuff. So that is a interconnected system of information being sent around that is essentially an internet. That's one way. Granted, you can just imagine the kind of flaws that could come with that. People could format the USB drive, things like that. So that's not necessarily the best way to go about it. Another way that it's being done, this is becoming very, very popular, is what's called dark fiber. Dark fiber there's lots of, now you may be aware of like Verizon in the United States has what's called FiOS, which is fiber optic internet. And they started laying it out in certain areas of the country, like the Northeast a little bit, in other areas, and Google's actually doing fiber too. But anyway, so they're laying out this fiber here and there, but there's companies that have come and gone that started to lay out fiber, but then just left. And like even in some big cities, there's buildings that are just empty, but they have the latest in communications, networking technology sitting inside those buildings just waiting to be used. And so hackers are connecting to the fiber and making their own like dark nets, okay, where, it's their own little internet that they're doing, and they're pushing out and in some cases they're accessing, the TCP protocols of the regular internet and sending it off and then hiding the dark net while still being able to connect to the internet. Okay. So there is, these alternative internets, the internets, do exist, and they're already happening. Another popular thing is mesh networking, which is essentially that if you have let's say you had a bunch of wireless or a bunch of like Bluetooth or some kind of wireless connectivity for like, say, 100 laptops in upstate New York. Those laptops could actually bounce their signal off of the wireless signal off of each other and create like a LAN, a local area network. And then that could bounce. And then if you had 1 million people with the same laptop with the same protocols, they would all be able to access each other in kind of a huge peer-to-peer network that requires no infrastructure. Okay, so that's mesh networking. They're also doing that with cell phones to allow for like a mesh network cell phone service. That's happening. I mean, it's happening. So, the private sector is already 10 steps ahead of the government because the government's only been working on at least the quantum internet thing for only 2 years. The other interesting thing that I want to see more developing on, and this is the one that's got me the most excited, is radio, packet radio. Radio is something that's kind of been dying off, and good or bad, whether or not you use AM or FM in your car, maybe you don't. I usually don't. I just use my cell phone. But something that people started to realize, even in as early as like the 80s, was that over radio, you could send data, not just music, not just like, CBs talking to each other, but you could actually send data packets. And in the 90s, in fact, this had gotten so far developed that people were sending programs, like they were sending software, like they'd send a copy of Photoshop or something over radio signal. Okay. And now you can get into the ideas of, where radio can kind of falter and, that it's easily disruptible. FM, not so much, but, yes, that argument can be made. Okay. But it's there. And if like, say with the liberty or anarchist movements, if you're in like intentional communities, and you're in small areas, I mean, packet radio is just the way to go. And you can buy a lot of, there's modems that receive, packet radio signals. And there's a little community out there about that. But that's the one that I want to see a lot of movements get behind, because it's technology that's kind of like everywhere, and you can bounce radio signals off of pretty much anything that's metal. So if you're talking about what's the thing that can that's the most foolproof and that's the most readily available and that already has, even a larger infrastructure than the internet has, it's radio. And so data packet radio, if you go to Wikipedia and you type in packet radio, you can kind of read up on it a bit. But that's all dealing with information because it hasn't really been developed as far as it can go. So that information's kind of old. But this is where it could go places. And it's something I want to talk about in future hacker conferences, which I'd like to be attending. So anyway, this is Brian Sovryn. Hope that answers your question. I'll be right back with more.
Got an energy spike.
Launch.
In the third age of mankind, an age plagued by an evil empire that seeks to destroy humanity, it is our last, best hope for peace. It is Babylon 5.
All fighter squadrons launched. Get us out of here. Return fire. Well, freeze them.
Watch Babylon 5.
You can watch Babylon 5 and experience the greatest show in television history. See the entire series completely free by going to thewb.com/shows/Babylon 5.
Software of the Week.
It is time for Software of the Week, where I cover various pieces of software that I think my listeners may find useful, or that I've just enjoyed, or even sometimes I will talk about software that might suck, and yet maybe everybody likes for some reason, or that that you're not aware that, hey, no, actually stay away from the new version because it's fallen apart. Like I would say about iTunes, ever since version 11, iTunes has been, it's lost its charm, in my opinion. But anyway, we're not talking about iTunes. What we're talking about, this is actually a great piece of software. It's called TeamViewer, and you can find it at teamviewer.com, just how it sounds, Team and Viewer. And what it is, it allows you to, from other computers or your cell phone or your tablet, it allows you to remote access other machines. Okay? Pretty much other computers. Like if you had a big desktop machine at home, a big desktop computer at home, and you wanted to access it, while you're in Cancun or something, even though I hear Cancun's not that great these days. If you wanted, you could do that. You could essentially, you could have the TeamViewer app on your phone, be it Android or iOS. It's available for both. And then you could have it set for your Linux computer, or it works on Apple, works on Windows as well. And if you have the TeamViewer software on there, you can actually access your computer and play with it and do whatever you do. You can even, now admittedly, the software is kind of like, it's a little sketchy in that, if you tried to watch a movie on it, it really wouldn't work that well because the frame rate kind of stinks. But you could definitely get downloads going. Say you wanted to torrent. If you weren't already torrenting on your phone, which I recommend doing, I think that's an awesome thing that I love it when I'm torrenting, just kind of like walking down the street, right out of my, right out of the back pocket of my ass, I'm torrenting files. I think that's so cool. But if you wanted to just do it from home, maybe make it a little simpler or save a few steps for you later when you get home. You can actually access your computer with TeamViewer. You install the program on your computer and you install the app on your phone or tablet, and you can access it and do whatever you do. Or you can get files and upload them maybe to Google Drive. That way you can directly get them on your phone. The possibilities are endless. I thought, the first time I used TeamViewer, I've been using it for about a year. The first time I used, and also it's totally free, by the way. Absolutely totally free, which is, that's amazing because there's other software out there that does similar that costs like $15, and I don't think there's an advantage there. I haven't seen any real advantages with those as to what TeamViewer does. Now, TeamViewer does make money if you're a business. They do ask you to get TeamViewer for business, and you hash out a subscription fee or whatever for that. But just for your own personal use, it's totally free. I imagine the reason that it's free is because if however many people have the TeamViewer app, maybe they can bounce all the bandwidth off of each other. So the more people that use it, the better for the businesses that actually pay, but you still get full benefits from using it. And is there a trust issue involved? Sure, because if TeamViewer is sending every little signal from your computer to your phone, obviously they can see everything that's being done on your computer. That's up to you whether or not you trust the company to do that, and you probably want to read their terms of service and their agreement license and everything to make sure that it fits in with what you want. So do your due diligence on that. But I find it to be incredibly useful. I loved the first time I used it. Like I was saying, the first time I used it, I felt like Batman would always, from his cowl, he'd always access the back computer in the Batcave. And that's exactly what I felt like, because I had this little crappy Android phone at the time, and I was accessing this incredibly powerful computer, and I was like, oh man, this is so cool. So check it out, teamviewer.com. I definitely recommend it, and I'll be back with more.
What does freedom mean? Tune in to LRN.FM to find out. LRN.FM is the Liberty Radio Network, a collection of live talk radio and podcasts, all coming from a principled pro-liberty perspective. LRN.FM show hosts aren't left, right, or conspiracy kooks. You can tune in 24/7 to LRN.FM via your phone, computer, satellite, and more. Listen free anytime at LRN.FM. That's LRN.FM.
Brian! Stop playing those video games!
tips?
Just a minute, Mom.
Game Talk.
It's time for Game Talk, arguably my favorite part of the show. And this week, got kind of an interesting story. Obviously, Game Talk, we talk about games, not necessarily. Obviously, Sovryn Tech is a show about science, technology, and how it can set you free. Game Talk, doesn't necessarily have to fit in with, okay, how does this pertain to liberty, for ourselves. I like to talk about games, and I like to have a little variety on the show. That's why there's various segments. So here it is, and this is all about consoles, the almighty consoles, which we briefly talked about earlier. And this article comes from TechCrunch. It's by Daryl Etherington. And home console gaming may suffer death by 1,000 cuts rather than a major revolution. So what does he mean by that? Well, let's go ahead and read the story. The Ouya is making its way out to backers even now, though my shipping notification still hasn't arrived, grr. And judging by early impressions, it's no silver bullet to take down the behemoths like Sony and Microsoft. The $99 Android-powered console still isn't fully formed exactly, but it's doubtful that between now and June 25th, it'll take on giant killer proportions. Likewise, the recently announced BlueStacks Android gaming console, which features a subscription-based pricing model, probably won't alone topple the giants. So what are they talking about there? Now, the Ouya, again, $99. We talked about that earlier in the show, too. The Ouya is a $99 game console that plays Android. It runs on Android. It plays Android games. It has some other options, too, to where, I think it can access OnLive, or it access some streaming options so you could play some of the bigger games. And, again, it's only $99. And it's gotten some pretty great ratings as far as on a repairability standpoint. It got a 9 out of 10, as in you could take it apart and fix it yourself, which is not unique to game consoles. In fact, I've been ripping apart game consoles for probably 20 years, or maybe less, maybe 15, to where, you can make it so that you could play burned games, or play, not necessarily burned as in I download an illegal copy, but burned as in I can't get my hands on the Dragon Ball Z game from Japan because they never ported it to North America, but my North American PlayStation can't play Japanese games, so I had to modify it. That way I could play a game in Japan that should have been released in America if they knew what American taste buds were really like. And so that's what I mean by that. And so that's an important thing, to be able to take apart a console. They're very much computers these days. They've been computers for a long time. In fact, the original Nintendo Entertainment System, the NES, in Japan, that was not called the NES. It was called Famicom, which was short for Family Computer. These things are real computers. Whether they've developed as such in North America, they certainly have done so in the rest of the world. Also, the BlueStacks Android gaming console. BlueStacks is a company that makes an Android emulator that I think we may have talked about on the show before, that you are able to download and put onto a Mac. In fact, I know we've talked about it for, I think, Software of the Week in the past. And it allows you to run Android apps on your PC or Mac, which is pretty cool. So that's another thing that's coming out too. Anyway, we'll continue with the story. But combined, these and a slew of other devices, including the Game Stick, smart TVs from manufacturers, Steam boxes. Steam boxes are the company Steam, there was a software Steam made by the company Valve. They're releasing what are essentially computers designed to only run Steam and thus to only play video games. So that's a console of a sort. And even Google and Apple hardware are eating away at what was once a fairly exclusive field. It seems a lot of people are waiting for a watershed moment to signal a significant shift away from traditional console gaming to a new paradigm. But increasingly, it looks likely that what we'll see instead is an erosion that more closely resembles glacial shift, but on a less geological timescale. There's evidence to suggest that console gaming is already losing significant ground, like quarterly results from Nintendo that show a dramatic decline in consumer interest in the recently launched Wii U console. And while Sony saw its first full-year profit in half a decade, meaning they were finally in the black after 5 years, most of the good news was on the smartphone side, and PlayStation sales fell for the year. Microsoft is still doing fairly well with the Xbox 360, but growth of key accessories like the Kinect has slowed with time. Slower Kinect sales are a good bellwether for the industry's overall health. Quick shot with the Xbox. The successor for the Xbox is coming out. And actually, it is proven now that it will allow, you do not have to be always connected to the internet which is something we've talked about in the past on Sovryn Tech. You do not always have to be connected to the internet for the new Xbox to work. So just getting that out there. Slower Kinect sales are a good bellwether for the industry's overall health, if only because it and devices like it are where console makers are turning to try to inject some fresh life into a market that had recently started to look fairly stale. To some extent, Kinect, Move, and other gimmicks like the screen of the 3DS are an answer to incursions by mobile gaming and other alternatives. Just like point-and-shoot cameras needed differentiating features like long zooms to prove themselves relative to smartphone cameras, video games need something new to reel in new buyers. The new crop of challengers to the console gaming market, including Ouya and the new BlueStacks Game Pop console, risks getting discounted by critics as just another round of devices like the GP2X Wiz or the Gizmondo, which had limited appeal and then faded into the background of video games history as little more than a minor footnote. But that's taking too short-term and dismissive a view on what's currently happening in the video game space. It's true that, as ardent console gamers continually remind me, there will always be a demand for that type of content. Now, that's very funny, okay? And I'll talk a little bit more about this, but real quick, look, these console players are saying there's always going to be a demand for consoles. Don't worry, they're not going to die. The same thing has been said about PC gaming. There's always going to be a demand for PC gaming, and now what's on the rise? Because as much as this article is talking about console gaming sales going down, PC gaming sales are going through the roof. So there's this kind of, this balancing act that's not balancing at all. Console games are up, PC gaming's down. PC gaming's up, console gaming's down, which is what seems to be the stage it's at right now, but we'll talk more about that in a second. Increasingly, however, there's a growing contingent of players that are fine saying, if I can get it on my phone, why do I need it anywhere else? And that's a market that's ripe for a living room transition, like the ones being attempted by Ouya and BlueStack. It's easy to discount these ahead of their full consumer launch, and I don't expect them to have an immediate impact on console sales, but they are signs of a sure shift and one that won't go away, even if it doesn't provide the sort of bomb shock disruption that we're so fond of identifying and championing. Okay, so this is a very gloom and doom article for consoles, saying, look, consoles aren't innovative anymore. And then now there's new consoles coming out, but what exactly are they going to offer? If you love your console games, I'm not much of a console gamer, and I do like it when I have games on my phone and then on my PC. That's why I'm pretty interested in getting, like I mentioned before, the NVIDIA Shield. I think that sounds like a great product, especially for my type of gaming. This same kind of article I remember reading when I was like 13 or 14 in the mid-90s, when the Panasonic 3DO came out, the Atari Jaguar came out. This whole slew, they didn't even mention those. They mentioned a couple like the Gizmondo and whatever. But there was a whole slew of video game systems that came out. Really high-end, they had a lot of press going for them, and yet they all fell by the wayside, and essentially Sega and Nintendo stayed dominant, even though Sega years later would drop out of the hardware business entirely. But what would happen is that, Sony stepped up to the plate with the PlayStation, and Microsoft stepped up to the plate with the Xbox. So this isn't to somehow theorize the death of console gaming. No, and it's not that there'll always be a demand. It's just that, and the person writing this is kind of looking for the shift, but he doesn't understand that this deluge of new consoles is part of what brings on the new, the new tech, the new console that has the new abilities that we're looking for. It's what, because what they'll do is the big companies will look at these little guys and say, okay, where did they innovate? And then they'll copy. But then they'll keep on going. Because, obviously the Xbox isn't going anywhere. Anyway, if you have thoughts, email me, sovereigntech@hush.ai. I'll be right back.
Are you searching for a mouthwatering, all-natural, sweet and sticky treat? What if I told you it was also made by a chef who believes in freedom, just like you? You're not dreaming. This is real. Head over to Mandrick.com. That's MANDRIK.com. There you'll find George's famous baklava in classic and dark chocolate flavors. To those with special health needs, George's famous baklava also has a treat for you. Golden delicious, low-carb, gluten-free almond cookies. Order with PayPal or Bitcoins. In just a few days, your sweet treats will await you right at your doorstep. One more time, that's MANDRIK.com for George's famous baklava. Hacker Stories.
It is time for Hacker Stories, where I talk about some of the real heroes on planet Earth, be they black hat, white hat, gray hat, the hackers of the world. Hack the planet, hack the planet. Sorry, yeah, if you ever saw the movie Hackers, you'd get the reference. And what we have, this is a pretty interesting article, or not article, but it was a newscast from a local news in Colorado called 9WTK, and it's hackers behind some free Wi-Fi hotspots. So what is this all about? That free coffee shop, this is the article, that free coffee shop or airport Wi-Fi signal you normally trust could be an evil twin, created by a hacker to steal your identity and other private information. It's not the hotspot that's free, it's your data that's free, John Cilio, an identity theft expert, told 9 Wants to Know. That's the name of the news thing, 9 Wants to Know. Amid an increase in the number of businesses offering free Wi-Fi and the number of tablets in the hands of consumers, 9 Wants to Know showed how hackers can sniff out your data and rummage through your hard drive while you're online. 75% of the computers that authenticate to that Wi-Fi are vulnerable to this type of assessment or scam, said Tyler Tobin, a professional hacker who gets paid to test banking computer systems. This scam is common at airports. 20 suspicious Wi-Fi networks were discovered during a sweep at Chicago's O'Hare Airport, according to the Better Business Bureau. The Colorado Attorney General's office is aware of the scam and says victims may not even know they've been targeted until they see strange charges on their accounts or their bank accounts cleaned out. How it's done. Using a Wi-Fi hotspot device like an iPhone or MiFi equipment, a hacker can create their own Wi-Fi hotspot and disguise them under the name of businesses and airports you normally recognize. Connecting to their bogus network is like handing your computer straight to the cyber thief. If your security settings are vulnerable, the hacker can easily sniff out your passwords, credit card data, and other sensitive information you may keep on your hard drive. Some hackers don't even have to set up their own networks. They can infiltrate weaknesses in legit free Wi-Fi networks. Don't check your bank. Don't check your email. Hackers can be on those networks as well, and they can be sniffing the traffic, Tobin said. That's a man-in-the-middle attack. They can watch what goes across that Wi-Fi connection. Emails, bank, logins, whatever it might be, Cilio said. Folks, hackers move very quickly, said Chief Deputy Attorney General Cynthia Kaufman. They may only have their site open for 20 or 30 minutes. They collect information, they disconnect, and they're gone. Oh my God, they're like ninjas. At 9 News, Tobin and Cilio were able to simulate how a hacker can be on the same Wi-Fi network and download confidential and financial information from a 9 News laptop. A confidential folder was created on 9 News' computer desktop containing tax forms. Tobin was able to demonstrate how the folder was accessible on his laptop and how he was easily able to see and download the tax forms on his computer. What is also alarming is that Tobin used software that is free for download and often shared among hackers themselves. Very easy, it's point and click, Tobin said. And they did an experiment. 9 Wants to Know created its own free Wi-Fi hotspot and visited several areas around Denver to see how many people would connect to the network without second-guessing its security or purpose. Within minutes of turning on the network, 9 Wants to Know was able to see numerous people connect to the free Wi-Fi network along the 16th Street Mall downtown and the Aurora campus. At Denver International Airport, about a dozen people connected to the network within a matter of a couple minutes. 9 Wants to Know was able to talk to some of the people who connected to the network. One woman said she didn't have any concerns about connecting. It just said free Wi-Fi, she said. A spokesperson for DIA says there haven't been any bogus or suspicious Wi-Fi spots discovered at their location. DIA uses the Boingo Wi-Fi service for public use. And then the article goes on to discuss, ways to protect your data, and we can read those off. Many computer and data security experts say you should avoid public Wi-Fi altogether. But if you need to check something on the internet, you can follow these suggestions to keep your risk to a minimum. Here are 9 suggestions and tips to help you out. Use a VPN, which we've talked about VPNs on this show before. You can look back in show notes over the past few months, and you'll find great recommendations for VPN, including my personal favorite, which is hidemyass.com. Number 2, use encrypted browsing. When connecting to websites, see if there is an S after the HTTP in your browser. As in, if you look up top, where it says like www.google.com, see if it says HTTP or if it says HTTPS. Okay, and if it says secure, if it's HTTPS, your browser is securely transmitting that information to where even if they were, doing a man-in-the-middle attack and you were connected to their Wi-Fi, the information should be pretty much encrypted. Turn off sharing. Many laptops have sharing enabled on some of their hard drives and printers. That's something you can look into at whatever software you use. That's pretty much software specific, so you want to look into that if you're doing any kind of sharing things. Set up firewalls on your computer or device. Most operating systems already have firewalls built in. Windows has an excellent firewall built into it. Well, it's not excellent, but it's good enough. So that's not something to really worry about too much. And if you do purchase like an antivirus program of some kind, say like Avast or Kaspersky or something, those come with really great firewalls, usually included in the deal. Don't do any banking or shopping on public networks. Don't automatically connect to Wi-Fi networks. Use reputable antivirus software, which like we were just talking about. Hackers can also install malware on your laptop if you're using their bogus Wi-Fi network. The malware can be used to log your keystrokes. Question the Wi-Fi network. If you must use public Wi-Fi, ask the business behind it to make sure you're connecting to the legit network. Meaning, go up to if you're at the airport, maybe just walk up to someone at the airport, one of the employees there, and say, "What's the name of the network that I connect to here?" And that's pretty good common sense to do, I would think. Change your passwords routinely and use multiple passwords. That's kind of the harder part. Everybody always recommends that. Passwords are an incredibly inefficient way to secure data on a computer. It's the best thing that that humans have come up with so far, but it is incredibly inefficient. They're working. Everybody's trying to figure out what's the next best way to do it. Biometrics are not efficient either. There's a lot of different tricks that people are coming up with. Most of them being like some kind of 2-step authentication to where, or authorization where you have your password, but then on your phone you have an app that will give you a time-sensitive code. So you have to have both of those to be able to get in. That way you don't have to worry so much about your password. So those are things that that people are considering. Overall, I think this is overblown. I don't think there's that many people doing this. And in fact, especially like in airports, it's a pretty small radius of an area considering all the transmission going on inside of an airport. It's a pretty small radius of an area that could actually get duped. Now, granted, I guess if you're sitting in the middle of a food court, it's a great place to do it. It's a target-rich environment for, someone who may be doing malicious hacking of some kind. But it's important to bear in mind 2 things. One, most hackers, if they actually do this sort of thing, they do it for fun. And they really don't want to see what you're doing. They just want to see if someone would do it. It's like it's pranks. It's a laugh to them, and they have no intention on actually hurting you. But again, I do think overall this is a very, very overblown. They're just treating it far too seriously because I don't think it's as big a deal as they're saying. In fact, interestingly, if this was such a big deal, more news networks would have come out with the story instead of I had to go to a local Colorado affiliate, just to find a story that even says anything like this. So I don't think it's that big a deal. It may be, to dissuade people from, if one was of a conspiracy bent, I could see where people would say it's like, yeah, this is so that you only use your information through channels that the government's watching and you don't use your own. Well, maybe. I don't know. I think that's the reason we were talking about this earlier in the listener email section, where hackers are setting up their own networks. Okay. And it's not to spy on you. It's so that they can have their own networks and have their own privacy, which I would venture is far more likely what's going on than these people are suddenly like just taking all your information. Okay. And why? Well, then why are they calling it free Wi-Fi? It's so that, so that the security and the feds and whoever see, it's to dupe them, not to dupe you. So I think this is pretty overblown fear-mongering. Anyway, this was Hacker Stories. We got one more segment to go. I'll be right back.
This is Stephanie Murphy, Sovereign Tech Producer. You may know me from this show, but did you know that I have my own podcast? It's called Pork Therapy. Pork Therapy is a bit different from other shows. We cover current events, big ideas, and even relationship issues, all through the lens of how we can get more freedom in our lives. Oh, and you'll love Sex and Science Hour. Join me on my website, porktherapy.com. That's porctherapy.com. Now back to Sovereign Tech.
What are you doing? I can't believe I caught you again. You know, Jesus doesn't approve of this little habit of yours.
I know, baby, I know it's wrong, but it feels so right.
Well, it ain't.
But I've been doing it since I was 12 years old.
It's nothing but a sinful perversion of nature, if you ask me.
But, baby, I don't ever want to stop looking at tech websites, new gadgets, video games, software, or any of that stuff.
Well, then I'm leaving.
Okay. Bye.
Pick of the week.
It is time for Pick of the Week, where I get to talk about whatever I want to talk about, be it a movie, a video game, a comic book, a book, a TV show, piece of software, piece of hardware. Last episode, I got to talk about the Kindle Paperwhite 3G, which I just love. I mean, the amount of erotica that I can get onto that, and only on the Kindle, is nothing less than exciting. So, I get to talk about whatever I wish, and this week I was kind of debating on what I wanted to talk about. It was a debate between Star Trek and NVC. And if you're not sure what NVC is, that's the one that I'm going to go ahead and run with. We'll talk about Star Trek another time. NVC is nonviolent communication. It's somewhat popular in anarchist, libertarian circles. Somewhat. It's also kind of notorious in those same circles, admittedly. But what it is, the idea, and I'll do my best to explain it, because as much as I enjoy it, and as I've read about it, it's something that you work on probably for most of your life, or at least it takes a good while to get used to using. And it's the best way I can really describe it is that it's a language designed to make every situation, every connection you make with another person, a win-win. To where you're not shaming the person, you're not blaming. There's no shaming, there's no blaming. There's no right and wrong. There's no punishment and reward. It's just, what do I want? What do I want from you? It's a really, really beautiful thing. In fact, one of the most beautiful things, one of the things that attracted me to it in the first place is that it's a language that's literally all about me. Or it's all about you. And how you can get what you're wanting and connecting with people and doing so. It's not manipulation. Okay, I think that's what a lot of people think. There's people who consider it kind of cultish because it has I guess it has some jargon to it. Like speaking in NVC, another code word for it is you're speaking giraffe as compared to jackal. Where, like, for an example, if I was speaking jackal, I would say, "Wow, you're an asshole." As to where if I was speaking giraffe, I'd say, I hear what you're saying, but I get the feeling that, and you're discussing your feelings, not calling a person something, because they're just expressing their own needs, even if they're doing it perhaps in a poor fashion or in an inefficient fashion. So it's about having empathy for the other person and having empathy for yourself. And when you start talking that way, it's amazing because you realize when you start talking, it's all about talking in needs. Okay, like you have a need for privacy, or you have a need for security, or you have a need for food, or you have a need for health, you have a need for well-being, you have a need, which may be the ultimate need. You have all these various needs, and it's all about connecting with those needs and expressing those needs, to each other, connecting to each other by expressing those needs, and really just think about it. That way, there's no confusion. No, this is what I want. Okay? And it eliminates this whole coercion. That's another beauty part of it, is that it eliminates coercion because, let's think about this, okay? Say someone's doing something that you don't like. Okay, so ask yourself the question, what do you want them to do? What would you rather they be doing? And now, when you get into that, if you just ask that one question, what do you want them to be doing? You may think, okay, I need to manipulate them to get them to do what I want. But then you have to ask yourself another question, which is, why do I want them to do what I want them to do? And when you ask that question, do you want them to do it out of fear? Do you want them to fear you? And if you're wanting people to fear you, then I definitely recommend looking into NVC because, why would you want somebody to fear you? Especially as an anarchist. I mean, this is all about voluntary interactions. You want people to do it voluntarily. You want them to do it. You want them to want to, not out of fear, but out of love and mutual exchange. And so, again, you have to ask both questions. Okay, what do I want this person to be doing, and why do I want them to be doing it? And when you ask both of those questions, the idea of coercion just goes out the door. Because you want them to do it, say, out of love, or you want them to do it because they want to. You want them to do it because they're going to get something out of it too. Or at least, I'd hope that's why you want them to do it. Maybe, maybe you're just, I love selfishness, okay? But maybe you're just, maybe someone's just that much of a narcissist to where, no, they must do everything for me because I am me. And I would hope, that at least among my listeners, that's not the way, that people are thinking. So it's a fascinating way of language, and it's got a lot of history. It's been around for a good 50 years or so, maybe 40, 50 years. But it came from, supposedly, from what I understand, a lot of people think that this is actually originally how humans communicated. They didn't communicate with language that dominated. They didn't communicate with language that so much insulted. They just simply communicated what they could communicate, which is what they wanted. And subconsciously, they wanted it to be done for the same gracious reasons that they wanted to be done. It definitely holds on to the idea, the whole infrastructure of nonviolent communication holds on to the idea that humans are naturally good, and that they're naturally peaceful, that they're not normally predisposed to violence, and that they're not born evil. In fact, it's something, the guy who kind of created nonviolent communication, Marshall Rosenberg, he talks about that quite a bit. And I think I've yet to read a book where he's gone fully into it, but he may even be somewhat of a conspiracy theorist on the matter, to where he thinks that this whole domination language of the idea, no, you're wrong, I'm right, so you listen to me, you do what I say, that whole kind of thing was invented by, he definitely blames religions for that. As much as he tries to play nice with Judeo-Christian religions, he readily admits that it comes out of the ideas of original sin and things like that. But I think he does kind of play the conspiracy game where he's saying that it was invented, domination language was invented by people who probably were narcissists and wanted to control, people who were fascists. I mean, the state, you think about, the state, you think about governments, they love domination language. Another point of domination language, of language that isn't nonviolent communication, is the idea that you have to, or that you should. Okay, because those are forcing someone else's ideas and perhaps morality or immorality onto you. And so it eliminates that. So essentially, if the government spoke of nonviolent communication, there would be no concept of you have to pay taxes. It would be a voluntary exchange. Because why? Again, those two main questions. What do I want the other person to do, and why do I want them to do it? Now the government, obviously, why do they want you to do it? Because they're unnaturally greedy. I don't even know if that's possible, but I'm trying to come up with with a word to describe government. But government, just wants more. It keeps collecting more power. And so that's why. So, it loves that kind of language. So as far as books to read on nonviolent communication, hopefully I've done an alright job of at least intriguing you. I would not begin to say that I can explain it very well. I do use it. I try to use it when I deem it necessary, and I'd like to integrate it more into my speaking overall. Okay, but a couple books to check out, and then I'll leave with a kind of a closing point. But a couple books to check out. One is there's the main book, which is A Language of Life, Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. That's out there, and I think for Kindle you can get it for $8. I mean, and it's a big book, so that's a steal. And then the other one would be Living Nonviolent Communication, which is actually kind of a compendium, and that's on Kindle. That's $7, and that has a bunch of short booklets in it that talk about the purpose of anger. It gets into a lot of philosophical issues, how to raise kids, things like that. It even kind of talks about there is kind of an underlying spirituality to nonviolent communication that isn't necessary. Okay, it's just something that's just kind of a belief that Marshall Rosenberg holds. The language works, whether you're an atheist or a Buddhist or what. But speaking of Buddhists, this is an interesting thing that I just want to point out, just in case if you never read this anywhere else. One of the really cool things I thought that Marshall Rosenberg once said about nonviolent communication is that he compared it to a Buddhist parable, which was that say you're trying to get to the Buddha. Okay, you're on one side of the river, Buddha's on the other side of the river. The sacred ground you're trying to get to is on the other side of the river. And you want to cross the river to get to the Buddha and to get to the sacred ground where you can live in peace. So you build a raft to cross the river, right? Of course, that's what you do. And you build a raft and you go across the raft. And he likened the raft of getting to that place of peace. He likened the raft to nonviolent communication. But as the Buddhist parable goes, the person who crosses the river and gets to peace, but then continues to carry the raft, is a fool. Okay, so he himself treats nonviolent communication as a tool to get you to that point in life, to get you to maybe a degree of self-awareness, and that while it may naturally just flow from you, but it won't be like this mechanical, because again, I said earlier, nonviolent communication is kind of notorious because when someone's first starting out at it, or even if someone doesn't grasp it really well, it can come off as very mechanical and unnatural. It doesn't come off as authentic, and you always want to be authentic. At least that's what I always want. I want to be authentic to myself, and I want to be authentic to everyone around me. And so it can come off as very mechanical, and his point in that parable of using nonviolent communication to get to that point of peace in your life, and point of well-being, not necessarily peace, but to that point of well-being, is that just that way of thinking, of not shaming people, of not punishing, of not rewards, of all that. And I know that sounds far out, especially if you never contemplated that. It's what do you mean I don't do things for incentives? Right? I know that sounds weird, but look into it. Just, if you want to humor me, take a look into it, because I think you'll find what you read to be pretty exciting, maybe even kind of intoxicating, and how It's like, yeah, wow, because you can play it out in your mind and you can picture these conversations and you go, yeah, that is beautiful. So look into it. It's nonviolent communication. There's a link to the Center for Nonviolent Communication in the show notes that you can check out. Don't forget to hit me up on Google+. Okay, just look up Brian Sovryn. There isn't a Sovryn Tech Google+ page anymore. I'd love it for my listeners to just directly connect with me. And I think that's great. And so you can go to gplus.to/Brian Sovryn. I'll be at TerraCoin Conference 2013. See you next week. This is Sovryn Tech.
This has been Sovryn Tech. Visit us at sovryntech.com. That's SOVRYN tech.com. There you can connect with us, see more of what you've heard on today's show, and catch our podcast feed. Sovryn Tech is open source. We encourage you to share. Later, nerds.